So in this video I'll show you how to read the charts using volume profile and the basic volume profile shapes. This way you should be able to tell what the chart is telling you, what the volume profile is telling you, and what the price action is likely to do in the future. Alright, so let's get to it. Let's have a look at the basic shapes and what they are telling us in the charts. So before you, this is the euro-dollar chart. It is a 60-minute chart. And those profiles you see there, those are daily profiles, which means that every day a profile gets printed. So if you look at the first one, then this is a thin profile. And as I said in the previous video, thin profiles happen in a trend. So you can see that there is a trend behavior and a thin profile. What happens after a trend is a rotation. A D-shaped profile. This is a D-shaped profile. What is next is another thin profile, which is a sign of trend development. And after a trend, as usual, there's a rotation with D-shaped profiles. So you have a D-shaped profile in here, also in here. And what you can actually do is you can also merge those profiles like this. One big rotation and a D-shaped profile. The next day is a thin profile, another trend behavior, and it is followed by D-shaped profiles. This one and this one. Now this looks like a B-shaped profile, but this is a small exception, and it's very important to remember that when the price closes above 50% of the day, then it is not a B-shaped profile. Alright, it looks like a B-shaped profile, it looks like a sign of sellers, but actually you can see that there was a rotation and then buying activity. So it looks like a B shape, but I don't count it as a B-shaped profile because price action behind B-shaped profile should look, for example, like a trend followed by a rotation. Alright, not rotation followed by a trend. So this is not a proper B-shaped profile. So the next thing is a trend and a thin profile, and next day the price reverses and there is buying activity and another trend and another thin profile. After the trend there is a rotation and a D-shaped profile and another D-shaped profile. And again you can merge those D shapes and you'll see where the center of it is. This is the point of control of this big D-shaped profile. The next day there is a thin profile and then again a thin profile. This was a trend day. This was also a trend day. After the trend there was a P-shaped profile, which usually is a sign of end of a trend. In this case the price continued downwards, so in this case the P profile didn't really work. There was sort of weird profile with double distribution. It is a sort of thin profile, but it usually looks like this. There's a place with volume distribution at the top and then volume distribution at bottom. So this is double distribution volume profile, alright? I didn't mention it in the previous video as this profile is not that important, but sometimes it gets printed in the charts and this is how it looks like. So the next profile, D-shaped profile, temporary balance between buyers and sellers. The next day the point of control shifts downwards, but still there's a D-shaped profile. But you can see that the volumes are moving lower. And this indicates that the fair price value the market participants see is shifting downwards. Then there's a rotation, two D-shaped profiles. You can also merge those two to see where the point of control of the rotation is. Alright, one big D-shaped profile with point of control in here. Now there's a thin profile, another thin profile, which kind of looks like a B-shaped profile, but only a bit. And as I said, this really wouldn't be a B-shaped profile because the price shot upwards and it's closing above 50% of the daily range. Alright, so this wouldn't be a B-shaped profile, and still it looks more like a thin profile. Then the price reverses again into another thin profile, another trend development, and then there is a rotation. So again, I'm going to merge those profiles. And this is a D-shaped profile. Then there's another D-shaped profile, and then there is a trend development and a thin profile. After the trend development, there is a B-shaped profile, which indicates that the trend could be over or temporarily over. And after that, there are some D-shaped profiles in here, and in here. All those are D-shaped profiles, and what you can do is you can merge them to see where the point of control of this area is. Alright, here it is. So what happens next is that there is this profile which looks like a B-shaped profile, but it is not a B-shaped profile because the price closes above 50% of the daily range. So this is not a sign of strong sellers. Alright. After that, there's a temporary balance and a D-shaped profile, which is followed by a B-shaped profile, which indicates sellers, aggressive sellers. After that, there's another sort of B-shaped profile. It's not as clear, but I would say that this is also a B-shaped profile, another sign of strong sellers. And by the way, if you look at the price action, you can see those aggressive rejections of higher prices, signs of strong sellers. Then the price shifts downwards into a B-shaped profile. Then there is this double distribution, and after this selling activity, there is a D-shaped profile, which is a sign of a temporary balance between buyers and sellers. So there's a rotation, price is in balance. What happens next is a thin profile, strong trend development, not much time to distribute any volumes, the price is going downwards fast, so you can see that there are no significant volumes within this strong selling activity. After that, the price going to rise again, and there is a thin profile but in the counter trend. Afterwards, there is something like a B-shaped profile, but it's not a B-shaped profile. As you can see, the profile got printed for this whole area, including this candle, this one. And for that reason, it's not a B-shaped profile, because the day closes above the 50% of the daily range. Alright? So it's not a sign of strong sellers, because it's not a B-shaped profile. After that, there's also a thin profile, another thin profile, and then there is a B-shaped profile, which is kind of weird to see in uptrend. and especially when there is no reaction to it. But the reason there is no reaction to it, the reason the price doesn't go downwards, is this failed auction at the top. This works as a magnet. The price tests it. So this is probably why the price didn't go downwards. The price wanted to test above the failed auction. The next day was a temporary balance, a D-shaped profile. And as you can see, there is temporary balance every day. Those are D-shaped profiles, but the volumes are shifted upwards every day, which means that the market value is moving upwards. What happens next is a thin profile, strong buying activity, not much time to accumulate any volumes. But afterwards, the next day, and this is pretty weird, the price just goes downwards into another thin profile. By the way, there is very nice reaction, this one, to those volumes. If you merge them, this is the point of control of the whole area. But I'll speak about this in a strategy section, alright? So let's just focus on the volume profile shapes. So after this thin profile, another thin profile gets printed, another downtrend, and after that there is another profile which sort of looks like a P-shaped profile, but the range isn't that big, and actually you can classify it as a D-shaped profile or as a P-shaped profile. This is not as clear, especially when the range is that tight. The next day there is a sort of thin profile, and afterwards the price goes downwards, the volumes are shifted downwards. There's a B-shaped profile, sign of sellers, another B-shaped profile, another sign of strong sellers. Then there's a rotation, D-shaped profile, sign of balanced market. And after that, there's something that looks like a P-shaped profile, but it is not a P-shaped profile because the price is closing below 50% of the day. So this is not sign of strong buyers. Alright? Because this is not a proper P-shaped profile. So what happens next is a balanced D-shaped profile, balanced market. After that, the price goes out of the balance into a P-shaped profile and then into a B-shaped profile. Afterwards, it goes into a balance. And what I wanted to show you is that this is what usually happens when there is a P and then there is a B. Usually the price is just rotating and creating one big D shape. Alright, so the volumes shift from upwards to downwards and then usually to the center. And if you merge those three profiles, then it creates one big D-shaped profile. Alright, one big balance in this area. This is a balanced market. Afterwards, the volumes start to shift. This is a thin profile, and then there is a D-shaped profile, which is a balance. And this is sort of confirmation of the trend development, because if there's a trend development like this, and then the price stays at the top of this price development and creates a D-shaped profile, then it is a confirmation that the market participants see those higher prices as a fair value. Alright, so the price will tend to return back to this area. So the next profile is a P-shaped profile, and it is a sign of strong buyers. Also, you can see the strong buyers. If you look at the price action, you can see that there is a strong rejection of lower prices. There's aggressivity in here, buyers defending their buying positions. So P-shaped profile. Afterwards, there is this weird profile, hard to tell what it is. looks like a P-shaped profile, but the price is closing at the low of it below the 50%, so it is not a P-shaped profile. So I wouldn't really classify this one as any sort of profile. What happens next is that there is a thin profile, or it sort of looks like a P-shaped profile. Alright, and this is a trend development, and afterwards you can see that the higher prices got accepted because there is a D-shaped profile, so those prices will likely to be a fair value prices. Those prices in this area are currently fair value prices, fair value of the euro dollar. Alright, so D-shaped profile, another D-shaped profile. You can also merge those, and you see that this whole area is a one big D-shaped profile with point of control in here. From this point of control, strong selling activity starts, and there is a thin profile. Afterwards, a really small D-shaped profile, temporary balance between buyers and sellers. This is sort of weird look profile. I don't really know how to classify this one. The range is just too small, so not really any information in here. Afterwards, the price goes into a selling activity. There's a thin profile, another thin profile. And after that, there is a D-shaped profile, temporary balance between buyers and sellers. Another one, another temporary balance between buyers and sellers. Then there is a B-shaped profile, which is not a B-shaped profile because the price is closing above the 50% line, so this is not a B-shaped profile. The price is shifting upwards. You can see that there is a P-shaped profile, which is a sign of buyers. And afterwards, there is this weird thin profile, which got printed when the price got upwards and then downwards. This is not really a profile which would tell you that there is a trend development, because there is not a trend development. The price just got upwards and downwards. Afterwards, there is this double distribution profile, which doesn't really tell you anything unless there is a D-shaped profile after it. If there was, then there was likely to be a rotation, alright? But there isn't a D-shaped profile after it, so it doesn't really tell us anything. Then another thin profile, price goes downwards and upwards, and it's basically the same case as in here when the price went upwards and downwards. This doesn't really tell us anything, in my opinion. Afterwards, there's a rotation, there's a D-shaped profile, then there is a sort of thin profile, but I wouldn't really classify it as a thin profile since the price doesn't really leave the range of this D-shaped profile, so it's more likely that the price will stay in a rotation, create another D-shaped profile, and you can actually merge those profiles, those three in a rotation, and you will see that there is one big D-shaped profile with point of control in here. Then there is a thin profile in here, and again a balance. So the higher prices got accepted, but there was a B-shaped profile in here, which is a sign of strong sellers. So you may want to think about looking for shorts in a case like that. As you can see, the price went downwards. This is a double distribution profile, but it doesn't really tell us anything in this case. Afterwards, there's a balance, D-shaped profile, and then there is a thin profile, or also sort of double distribution profile, but I would say that it's more like a thin profile, this one, because there is a trend behavior. After a trend, as usual, there's a rotation. So if after a trend you see a D-shaped profile like this, there'll likely be a rotation. So another D-shaped profile, and then there's a sign of buyers because there is a B-shaped profile. what I meant is sellers. B-shaped profile is sellers, alright, not buyers. It's followed by a D-shaped profile, which adds to this whole rotation. And afterwards, a thin profile indicating a trend. After the trend, it's pretty usual that there is a D-shaped profile, which is a sign of temporary balance between buyers and sellers. This looks like a small B-shaped profile, a sign of sellers. This looks like a P-shaped profile, but it's not a P-shaped profile because the price closes below the 50% of the daily range. Afterwards, a thin profile and a P-shaped profile, which is a sign of strong buyers. And as you can see, afterwards the price is shifting upwards. The volumes are shifting upwards. This is sort of thin profile. There was more time to accumulate volumes in here. So that's why the thin profile is not as thin, but I would still classify it as a thin profile. Afterwards, another thin profile, strong buyers pushing the price upwards, and afterwards, rotation. The higher prices got accepted. Alright, so there's a temporary balance in here, and afterwards there's also this thin profile, but in this case it is an exception because this is not a trend. The price went upwards and downwards. But still, if you are trading this profile, then the price was going upwards, looked like a trend, then it returned and reacted to this significant volume cluster. So this was nice reaction to it, to the trend setup basically. The trend setup is one of the setups which I'll be showing you later, even though the whole day didn't end up as a trend day. But more on that later when I'll be talking about the setups. Alright, so that's for the daily profiles. You can apply the same logic, you can read the charts the same way with different profiles, also with different settings. So let me show you some examples. So I switched to another chart and to another profile period. This chart is the crude oil, the futures. It is still 60 minutes chart, and I used the weekly profiles. So let's have a look at it. I wanted to show you how the profiles look like when there's a strong trend behavior. So let's start with this D-shaped profile. This is a weekly profile, and this is a sign of balance between buyers and sellers. However, after the balance, the price went into a selling activity and created this thin profile. You can see that there are some volume clusters, but those significant volume clusters got created within the thin profile. Alright, the next thing that happens is sort of double distribution. In this case, it doesn't really say anything because it's not followed by the D-shaped profile. If it was, then it would be a sign of rotation, but it isn't, which means that the volumes are shifting downwards from this place to this place, sign of sellers. Alright, then there is a B-shaped profile, which is pretty important because there was aggressive selling activity, and then the lower prices got accepted. So if you look at this whole area, you can see that the volumes are shifting downwards. The fair value is shifting downwards all of the time. This is how downtrend looks like. Volumes shifting downwards. So after this B-shaped profile, there's a thin profile, aggressive trend activity the whole week. Then again, thin profile, aggressive selling activity for a whole week. Then B-shaped profile, sign of aggressive sellers. You can see that there was aggressive selling activity in here, and then The price was rotating in here, accepting the lower prices. Afterwards, another thin profile, strong selling activity. Alright, another sign of strong sellers. And then there's a balanced market. And there was a rotation for 3 weeks. There was sort of P-shaped profile, sign of buyers, but those buyers didn't really hold, and this P-shaped profile was more or less a part of this whole area where there is a D-shaped profile, P-shaped profile, and D-shaped profile. Well, actually this P-shaped profile looks more like a double distribution profile when I'm looking at it like this, because it's followed by a D-shaped profile, and merging all those will create one big D-shaped profile. This is a balanced market in here. But if you look carefully, you can see that the volumes are actually shifting a little bit downwards in this whole area. So the fair value is a little bit lower than in the middle. Alright, this could be a sign of sellers. Those sellers, most likely. Alright, here are the sellers. Trend development. Now, important thing is this P-shaped profile. The reason is that when you see a P-shaped profile after a trend, it could mean a temporary balance or a change of a trend. As you can see in this case, it was a change of a trend. The P profile got followed by a thin profile, another thin profile, change of a trend. Alright, so that's for the weekly profiles. And let me now switch to another market and another example. So the next market and another example is on the ES, which is futures for Standard & Poor's index. This is a daily chart, and the profiles that I use in here are monthly profiles, which means that every month a volume profile gets printed. So let me just show you this uptrend from 2017. So if we start, for example, in here with this D-shaped profile, this is a balance between buyers and sellers in this rotation. And afterwards, from this balance, the strong buying activity starts. It starts with a thin profile, strong buyers pushing the price upwards. So this is a trend. Then there's a D-shaped profile, which is a balanced profile. The volumes are shifting upwards and the market is accepting the higher prices, which are in here. This D-shaped profile is a sign that the higher prices got accepted. Then there is a sort of B-shaped profile, but it is not a B-shaped profile because the price closes above 50% of the whole period. So this is not a B-shaped profile. This is more or less just another volumes in this whole rotation. So if I merge those two profiles, you can see that it's basically one big D-shaped profile. Afterwards, there's a sign of strong buyers. There's a P-shaped profile. You can see that there was a rejection of lower prices and the volumes are shifting upwards. The fair value is shifting upwards. Now there is a D-shaped profile and again the volumes are going upwards. Higher prices got accepted. Those are signs of strong buyers. Those are signs of strong trend. Then there is a P-shaped profile, another sign of strong buyers. Afterwards, there is this weird profile, sort of double distribution profile, but it's not followed by a D profile, which would indicate a rotation. So this doesn't really tell us anything. Afterwards, another sign of strong buyers, P-shaped profile. Then another P-shaped profile. Afterwards, there is something that looks like a B-shaped profile, but it is not a B-shaped profile because the price is closing above 50% of this whole area. So this is not a B-shaped profile. This is not a sign of sellers. All right. Afterwards, another sign of buyers, B-shaped profile, and aggressive buying activity, a thin profile. All right, so this is where the uptrend stops. What I wanted to show you is how you can use those kind of profiles to see the big picture and to see how the volumes are usually distributed, how the volumes shift upwards in an uptrend. As you can see, there was not a single B-shaped profile in this area. It was mostly P-shaped profiles, followed by a D-shaped profile, followed by a P-shaped profile, or a thin profile, D-shaped profile, P-shaped profile. This is what usually uptrend looks like, something like this. There is not a single B-shaped profile in this whole trend. Alright. Now let me show you one last example. This is the US dollar Canadian dollar chart. It is a daily time frame, and those are monthly profiles. And you can use those profiles, for example, for your swing trade analysis. I also do it like this. Don't mind those lines in here. Those are just some trading levels that I have or that I had for my swing trading. Alright, so let's start in here. As you can see, there's a sort of double distribution profile, and afterwards you can see that the volumes are shifting downwards. The main volume clusters are shifting downwards. And actually, let me merge this profile with this one. And this is a one big thin profile. It is a sign of strong sellers pushing the price downwards. So for example, when you are doing your swing trading, in case like that, you want to enter short trades only. You don't want to enter longs, because as you can see, there is a thin profile. The sellers are pushing the price downwards and the volumes are shifting downwards. The balance is shifting downwards. All right. After this selling activity, there's a rotation and a D-shaped profile. Now the market participants are deciding what to do next. They are creating new positions, and as you can see, afterwards the price went downwards. This is also sort of thin profile, and afterwards the price turns without any sign on the profile, I should say, and it created this profile. It looks like a B profile, but it's not a B-shaped profile because the price closes in here. This whole period has 50% somewhere in here, and the price closes above the 50% mark. So this is not a B-shaped profile. This is not a sign of strong sellers. It's more of a sign of buyers because the volumes are shifting upwards. This is a D-shaped profile and the volumes are shifting upwards also in here. And by the way, this is not a P-shaped profile. This is not sign of strong buyers. The reason is that the price is closing in here below 50% of this whole area. Alright, so this is not a sign of strong buyers. Then there is a sort of D-shaped profile, a rotation, a balance. It is not that clear. I mean, the shape of the profile is not that clear, but I would classify this one as a D-shaped profile, as a balance. And in balance like this, buyers could be entering their positions or sellers could be entering their positions. In this case, you can see it was buyers. There's a thin profile. The volumes from this place are shifting upwards and again upwards. But in here, there is a B-shaped profile, and this is a sign of sellers. So what happens next is a thin profile, sellers entering the market, pushing the price downwards. And then what happens next is the price reacts to those volumes in this volume cluster. This is one of the setups I will be showing you later. and the price goes into a D-shaped profile, and the volumes are shifted higher again. And then there is the double distribution followed by a D-shaped profile. And this is a sign that there will be a rotation. So as you can see, there are D-shaped profiles. I should probably merge those into one big area, and you will see the one big D-shaped profile. Alright, this is the one big D-shaped profile for this whole rotation area. After the rotation, there was a thin profile and another thin profile, and this started to look like a trend, but it was a false breakout, and there was another trend, and the price went back into this area where the market participants saw a balance, a fair value. So the price tested higher prices, went downwards, and went again into this area, which works as a magnet because it is a fair value. The price was rotating at this place for a long time, so it was accepted as a fair value. There was a D-shaped profile in here, and after that the price were shifting upwards with a P-shaped profile, sign of buyers, and afterwards sort of B-shaped profile, but the price is closing somewhere in the middle of this area, so it's sort of hard to tell. And in this case, I would say that this is a part of a one big rotation in here. So there's now a new balance in the market, and the new balance looks like this. D-shaped profile, rotation, and the balance. So we had a balance in here, now we have balance in here. Not much happening on the Canadian dollar. You can see that it's doing D-shapes. So we had D-shape in here, we have D-shape in here. So this is basically how sideways price action development looks like. Alright, if you stack the profiles, they'll create a D-shaped profile. And this is a long-term rotation, as opposed to the trend which I was showing you before. Alright, so I hope this video helped you understand how you can read the charts using the basic volume profile shapes. Those are very useful. For example, if you want to read the bigger picture of what the market is up to, or if we are in uptrend, downtrend, or in a sideways price action. And this is basically what most of the people who use volume profile look for. Those static volume profile shapes. I personally prefer to use those as a big picture to see the whole overview of what the market is doing, but I like to combine it with a flexible volume profile, which I use for specific areas in the chart and for my own trading strategies, which I'll cover in the next videos.